Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Ito ay nangangailangan ng patnubay at gabay ng magulang para sa mga batang manonood.
Warning. The following content may contain elements that are not suitable for some audiences. Viewer discretion is advised.
15. Brain food. Do you ever wonder what people did before the invention of assembly line, cups, and bowls? In ancient England, people used to the tops of hollowed human skulls to drink and eat. Number 14. Gel Heck No. Reportedly in the 1950s, an object fell from the sky near Philadelphia. Police officers checked out the scene and reportedly finding sticky, odorless ooze coming out of a strange item, which have been purple. According to reports, nothing bad happened, and the object apparently just dissolved. But it's still very creepy if it's true. The news story even inspired the horror movie The Blob. Number 13. Do the Wave. In 1934, a mountain slide dumped heavy rocks into a lake near a town called Tafjord in Norway. A small remote town, the slide triggered a 203-foot tsunami that hit Tafjord hard, killing 40 people and injuring even more. This real-life event inspired a horror movie called The Wave. Number 12. Most definitely. Hundreds of years ago, when people died on the battlefield or elsewhere outside, their bodies often just lay there until they rotted away. As they decomposed, their skulls would start to grow a moss called unsnea. People believed that this moss contained the spiritual qualities of the fallen soldiers, and they would gather it up as a medicine. Apparently, usnea that grew on hanged men's skull was seen as the most effective. Massive waves. Biggest tsunami record was 1,720 feet tall. It hit Lituya Bay in Alaska in 1958. Scientific evidence shows that this area is likely to be hit by another tsunami eventually. Don't judge the book by its cover. At Harvard University, there is a book bound in human skin. Number 9. A long time coming. Among the Toraja people on the Indonesian island of Sulawesi, when a family member dies, they aren't immediately buried. The Toraja think of death as a process, not a sudden change, and their elaborate funerals can take place months or even years after the death. During this period, the body of a deceased is wrapped in cloth and is thought to wander around the village until the departed person is finally officially laid to rest. Memento Mori. Victorian England had a bunch of strange fads. For example, tattoos were very popular, especially with Victorian women. Bizarrely, post-mortem photography was also at the rage. In this photograph, people would take a recently deceased family member and stage them, either in a family portrait or alone, as if the deceased was just sleeping or resting. Sadly, these people still look totally dead. Dead and dazzling. Honestly, Victorian people were really weird. In addition to being obsessed with post-mortem photography of their dead loved ones, they also liked to wear jewelry out of these deceased family members and friends, often incorporating teeth, hair, and bones into rings, necklace, and the like. Pink elephants. Hallucinations come in many different forms. Some people who are beginning to go blind see very realistic, absurd things that are not actually there. This is called Charles Bonnet syndrome. In one case, a woman was diagnosed with the eye condition glaucoma. Her life was very normal until a trip up to a grocery store triggered her hallucinations. The shelves would begin to drip and turn into thick mud. She could pull an item off the shelf, but this hallucination of mud was too thick to put in anything back of the shelf. Once she picked it up, these Charles Bonnet hallucinations can become so vivid that the people can see animals or entire landscape that do not actually exist. Bite me. In ancient China, there was a process of making a mummified man, which was essentially mummifying someone with honey. In order to do this, an elderly person, ideally near death, would volunteer themselves the process of being binge bathed in honey. and given only honey to eat, until their entire digestive system was honey. Then when the volunteer died, they would be covered in honey for 100 years. After this century or so, the contents were turned into a candy that was said to heal broken bones. Small but deadly. The Black Death was serious business centuries ago, and there's a reason to become an epidemic. Yersinia pestis, the bacteria responsible for the Black Plague, is unable to survive outside the body of its victim, but it has a secret weapon. It can disable its host immune system. With nothing to oppose it, it can multiply quickly and overrun a victim within hours. Two can keep a secret if one of them is dead. No one knows how famed creepy writer Edgar Allan Poe died. At least those who did know are long since dead, and all firm records of his death have been lost. Poe was found on Baltimore Street on October 3, 1849. Early, he was wearing someone else's clothes. He was in a pretty bad shape and died in hospital just 4 days later. He was never coherent enough to explain what had happened. He kept shouting Reynolds the night before his death. There is nothing left from his medical records, including even his death certificate. Speculation about the cause of death ranges anywhere from suicide, cholera, heart disease, epilepsy, and even murder. He was only 40 years old. More than a nightmare. Few people know it, but Wes Craven got the idea of a nightmare on Elm Street from a real story published in the LA Times. A boy who suffered terrible nightmares and actually ended up dying in the middle of one. As Craven said, he told his parents he was afraid that if he slept, the thing chasing him would get him, so he tried to stay awake for days at a time. When he finally fell asleep, his parents thought this crisis was over. Then they heard screams in the middle of the night. By the time they got him, he was dead. He died in the middle of a nightmare. Dark Lover. Although it was a political marriage, the union between Joanna I of Castile and Philip the Handsome, albeit the Handsome of Burgundy, was one of the passion, albeit lopsided passion. By all accounts, Philip was into Joanna, but just not enough to stay faithful. Unfortunately, Joanna was really into the Philip. When Philip's mistress had the misfortune of crossing paths with his wife, Joanna apparently snapped and hacked the other woman's hair off to scissors. Still unsatisfied with the dough, Joe then stabbed her in the face. But it gets worse. When Philip died, Joanna refused to let him go, literally. Refusing to part with her philandering husband, she viciously clung to the body even with her father and the government stepped in to finally bury Philip. Their separation did not last long. Joanna ordered him exhumed, leaped at his coffin, and kissed his dead feet. From that moment, you couldn't have Joanna if she couldn't bring Philip. The coffin, thankfully closed most of the time, would accompany her to meals, travels, and even her bedside. Only years later did Philip return to the ground, albeit at a safe distance, buried right outside her window. On the bright side, Joanna's cheating husband was finally all hers.